Good morning. Thank you very much, Lisa, for the introduction. And thank you all here for the Federation in particular for inviting me to give you an overview of this new regulatory system and to tell you what it means to yourselves. So I'm hoping to cover, hang on, we'll get the presentation started. Yeah, we're good. I'll cover the legislation, the scope of the regulations, where we're at now in terms of a state of play, and then the processes of registration and licensing. So just to start, why regulating? Obviously, it makes sense in a way. As many of you would be aware that hydromorphological activities are one of the main causes of pressure on our water quality in Ireland, and abstractions and their associated impoundments are a subset of that. So it does make sense to regulate these activities to ensure sustainable use of our water resources and to improve and protect our water environment. So if that's the background, let's take a quick look at the legislation. So the legislation is driven by the Water Framework Directive, which required the control on water abstractions and impoundments and required a registered and prior authorisation. So as the framework, the department then introduced in 2022 the Water Environment and the Abstractions and Associated Impoundments Act. And then in 2024, they introduced 3 sets of regulations, which effectively brought the whole system into operation on the 28th of August last year. So from there, we have a registration, licensing and a control regime. And the EPA are responsible for the licensing and control system and maintaining and establishing the register. So just very briefly, we all know what it is, but just in case, an abstraction is the removal or diversion of water from a river, a lake, a stream, or even pumping groundwater from through a borehole. An associated abstraction means a structure, this could be a dam or a weir, situated in the water that is to be maintained for the purpose of the abstraction. So we're not regulating all impoundments, we're just regulating associated impoundments. An impoundment then obviously changes the water level or flow in the surface, so it has an effect. So since August last year, the agency has been very busy because being the competent authority for the system, we had to update our website and include a lot of relevant information and guidance. And I do urge you to visit our website to learn more and how to engage with us. The Act and the regulations are quite extensive. They set out quite a lot of detail, and we have tried to summarise it and make it a little bit more accessible. And we produced this document called the Principles of Water Abstractions and Associated Impoundments Authorisation. That's available to download. It sets out the main requirements. It sets out the roles and responsibilities. So those of the EPA, those of the applicants that apply to us, and even local authorities and their roles. It's a short document, 24 pages, well worth the read, and hopefully it addresses some of your questions, but also if it isn't, we have a lot of information on the website, including FAQs that might be able to answer any questions you may have. So I'll direct you there for the extra bits of information. But one of the most common questions that we are getting is like, what volume are we talking about? And what we mean is it's the maximum volume in any 24 hours that you would therefore, and that's what you declare. So we're looking for the maximum daily volume, not the yearly or no averages. Now, you will also be required to give us your yearly or a total volume in a year, and that will take account of any seasonal reductions, and you can put it in there. If you don't know how much water you're taking, the EPA have an abstraction volume estimator, and that also addresses group water streams. So that can be used to calculate what you think you are taking out. So just to introduce you briefly to the Act, it applies a graduated approach to the regulation of abstractions, allowing for a licensing regime that is proportional to the level of risk being presented. And I'll get into that in a bit more detail as I go through the presentation. Very quickly, it's band 1 is, we'll call it the less than 25 cubic meters a day. These do not require to be registered, and that would be your typical household well, as an example. The second band is 25 to 199 cubic meters a day, and they require to be registered. So just to be understand that registration is not an authorization. This band in particular will undergo the risk assessment piece as to whether it needs an extra level of authorization. The third band, which is over 2,000 cubic meters a day and more, this is called the licensing threshold. So anything over that value requires a license, irrespective of its impact. So it's an automatic requirement for licensing. So I like this particular image because it gives us an idea of where the abstractions are in the country at this time. So we have a register in the EPA going back to 2018, and some of you will be aware of that, having registered your abstractions back then. We have 1,900 abstractions exceeding 25 cubic meters a day. The register is, by the way, available online for you to look at. As you can see, it is right across the country. Abstractions are spread. Drinking water is about 60%, but the sectors that take water from our environment range from agriculture right through to recreation. So it's a broad church of people that are abstracting water at this time in Ireland. Breaking the numbers down a little bit more and looking more closely at the drinking water sector, for which you're in that cohort, what you'll see is that we have overall there's over 315 abstractions that will require a full license. So that's 315 licenses automatically because they exceeded the licensing threshold. If we look at the drinking water, you'll see that's 176. And that's primarily at this time Uisce. And I think there's maybe 4 in the group water sector that would exceed this level of abstraction on a daily basis. The 933 abstractions in that 25 to 199 cubic meters, the group water scheme sector accounts for about a quarter of that at the moment. So we have, and that, as I said, will be looked at in a little bit more detail. Just to note, I guess, as well, that not everyone has registered at this time, and we do expect to see more registration coming on board. Yeah, so where's water been taken from? It's a very interesting picture, this one. So we have, in the higher abstraction rate, over the 2,000 cubes, the licensing threshold, it's 2/3 of it is actually taken from surface water. And in this smaller abstraction range, 3/4 are taken from groundwater. So it's an interesting picture, I think, of where we're at the moment. So this process flow diagram, it's a little bit busy, as you can see, but there's a couple of key things just to take to your attention. The first is that if you're over 2,000, it's an automatic requirement for license. So it goes a straight line and there's a licensing process to follow. The second area is if you're between 25 and 199, it goes into that salmony colour area, and this is where the EPA carry out the risk assessment. And the risk assessment is to determine whether you require a license or not. So if you require a license, you will be asked to fill out the application form and go through the licensing process. If you don't require a license, you'll be assigned a registration number or a new number. Since August last year, we've been pretty busy at trying to build a system, and we have a module now on Eden to allow organisations and groups to carry out, to report their registration, to change what they have already on the registration, and to apply for a licence. And to support that, we have a lot of guidance as well, and I'll go into that in a minute. Just to note, anything less than 25 cubic metres does not require to be registered, but everyone that abstracts water will be subject to general binding rules. So on the general binding rules, the EPA are tasked with setting these out in a document, and we're working on that at the moment, and we hope to have it in place either this side of Christmas or soon after. So the rules that are being developed are how the EPA will have to say how abstractors will measure or monitor their volume. It also sets out hydrological limits relating to abstractions, and we have published guidance on hydrological limits in about a few weeks ago. Actually, the final guidance was published. To note, the legislation is quite clear on a couple of rules, and these I want to bring to your attention. So you cannot cause a physical barrier to fish migration. You cannot impede sediment movement such that it would impact the environment. And then finally, touching on some of the work that was talked about earlier, you have to minimise leakage losses and apply the best techniques on that front. So just to say again that the general binding rules are under development, and we will issue them in due course. So let's get into the system of processes of registration. And I'll repeat again, it's where you're between 25 and 1,999 cubic metres a day. And we know that we do have a gap still in this space. We need more people to register. What we have done is we've put in a system. Registration is free and it's online. So there's two steps. You sign up to the Eden website and then you submit an online web form. It's a fairly straightforward process for the registration side of things. And to support you, we have developed a number of guidance documents. These include instructions on how to access Eden and how to fill out the web form on Eden. If you have any questions, obviously you can email us at licensing@epa.ie. So just a couple of things to note, just things we're picking up on. So when you register on Eden, you really need to be the name of a natural person or a legal entity. So not a, X group in West Limerick or something like that. So if you have a legal entity for your group, put in that detail. And also to note that if you have an abstractions from multiple water body types, such as one from a river and then one from a groundwater, that you need to register them actually separately. That's what the law requires. Obviously, well field can all be registered in one water body. So the multiple abstractions for the same purpose have to be registered together, but they have to be from the same water body. Again, just to say, registration isn't an authorization, it's just register. Okay, and the reason we really need a good, solid register is it helps us to manage the whole water balance and the sustainability. So keeping it up to date is paramount for our requirements, especially when we come to doing the risk assessment. So I encourage you to make sure to know that your details are correct and just update them as you see fit. Okay, so do you need a license? So again, let's focus in on the 25 to 199 cubic meters per day. So as I said, this is where we apply the risk-based approach to the regulations. And the agency is tasked with this job. Your role is to provide us with the information that helps us to make this determination. So I'll just take you through a couple of the steps that the agency has to go through. So we will first of all take the approach of the significant assessment, right? And this is done in accordance with an EPA methodology to identify significant abstractions in Ireland. Now that guidance is online and it involves a modelling system. So that assessment is done every 6 years, and everybody on the register gets that assessment done on an every 6 year basis. So it's very important that your data are up to date. If you're found to be a significant abstraction, an opinion will be communicated to the abstractor, observations will be invited, and an EPA determination will be issued out. And if you require a licence at the end of that process, you'll be asked to fill out a form, which is online as well. The second step, if you're not a significant register, this is a separate assessment we have to do. We have to check and see if EIA or retrospective EIA applies. And if it doesn't, that's fine. We issue a registration. If it does, we would require a licence. But to be assured, like the cohort, a large number of people are in between 25 and 199, and we expect the vast majority of them will not require a licence. So just on the licensing process, and I'm conscious that I'm running out of time. What we have is an application that's done by the abstractor or the operator, and that involves publishing notices, and there's a good bit of work involved in this. And then it comes into the agency and we do a consideration. We consult with specified bodies. We may request you for further information, and we invite submissions from anyone and everyone. So all third parties can get involved in the decision-making process. A proposed decision will issue out, and that will be to grant or refuse a licence. So you'll have an opportunity to comment on whether you agree with the conditions and the requirements. But the conditions will be based on what you applied for at the first instant. And then finally, after that process, a final decision is made by the agency. Just to say, licensing isn't as simple as a registration. It does require a good deal of technical documents. You have to look at the impact of your abstraction. You will be probably needing support from certain external experts. So just be aware that that's what's involved in licensing. And it's a longer process, so it does take time. So if you know you're going to exceed the licensing threshold, please start preparing early and get in contact with us. Very simply, it's the same platform to apply for a license. We have on the Eden website, you request access to the module. You submit your application through the module, and that would include uploading attachments such as evidence and supporting technical documents such as the impact assessment. You need to put up a site notice, you need to publish a newspaper notice, and as I said, you need to compile all that evidence to support your application. The application is yours, setting out what it is you will comply with in a license. The license should reflect your application if it's all done right. And most importantly, you need to pay a fee. So some applications may be accompanied by very specific reports, like an environmental impact assessment report or a natural impact assessment report. These are very specific to particular circumstances. So key messages, we're getting there. Please register if you haven't done so already. Register any new or proposed abstraction in Eden. Update your existing details on Eden or on the register if you haven't done so already, or when we ask you to. The agency will be coming out over next year or so, asking people to update their details so that we can carry out that risk assessment that I spoke about earlier. When you update your existing registration, if you intend to increase an existing abstraction or change any details. So that's the case. But just caution you that you're actually not allowed to commence a proposed abstraction or that revised increase in an abstraction without the agency having gone through its risk assessment and approved it. Finally, there is also, when it comes to licensing, which probably won't apply in many cases, but just to say, you need to apply for an extension. The law allows for an extension date if you need a license. By the way, the 28th of February was the deadline for the first anyone that was over 2,000 needed a license, and you had to apply for extension to get more time to the EPA. If we decide after the risk assessment that you require a license, the legislation sets a 6-month period by which you have to make your application, unless you again apply for an extension. So there are certain time locks in the whole system that we have to comply with, and we don't have any discretion on. That's it. What I'm very keen, I suppose, is to encourage you to engage with us, especially through your federation, as to what the implications are on this new regulatory system for you and how we might all work together and move the whole process along. So thank you very much for your attention, and we're looking forward to the questions. Thank you.